Deep South, right here in the African American owned broadcasting studio. WeBelieveDigital.com, our own platform. And so it's critically important that in the African American community we control the narrative. I look forward to receiving opportunities to show and advertise your products for goods and services and to move your brand along in this community. We're broadcasting live on Facebook. When We Believe Digital Podcast, go to Roku and download our app, and We Believe Global, with shows like this to bring articulate, intelligent conversations and dialogue to our platform. So I'm here to continue sounding the alarm. This is how the South is going to rise again.
Check mine, sir? Okay, good.
Welcome. .com. We're broadcasting live right here in Jackson, Mississippi, in our very own African American owned broadcast studio. We're being seen all over the world in over 139 countries. You can find us on YouTube, on Facebook, on Roku TV, and our very own platform, WeBelieveDigital.com. When you go to Roku TV and download the We Believe Digital app, you'll find that it sits right there next to Showtime and Netflix. That's right, a little old African-American owned studio in the main highway, right there with the big boys. And one day we hope to be as successful as they have been, because I'm sure their beginning wasn't quite as modest and humble as the one that we have, but we're trying. And with your help, we'll take this thing to the next level. I want you to go to WeBelieveDigital.com and hit the share button, hit the donate button, because we need your financial support. We need the dollars and cents that's necessary to put reporters in the field, to put engineers in the studio, to bring you the kind of content that we're committed to bringing, you know, where the truth is being spoken out loud, with individuals like my co-host, Dr. Eldridge Henderson, a young man that is renowned all over this country, a sought-after speaker. He has his own radio show, the L. Henderson Real News Tour. He's involved, he's committed. He's in this community working every day trying to make this a better place. Now, Dr. Henderson, it's always good to see you, and welcome to the studio.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Socrates. I'm always pleased to be here. I always like to talk to a man that knows a lot about economic development and one that has experienced failure and success in the early days, but now is nothing but success.
Right.
That's what I like.
And I told you earlier that, you know, I'm much like Michael Jordan. I never lost a game. I just ran out of time.
That's right. And that's a good way to look at it. That's a good way to look at it.
Any business person that is successful today has experienced some real traumatic events and failures in their lifetime. The key to it, Dr. Henderson, is what do you do then when you're flat on your back, when you've been knocked out? What do you do then? That's when it counts, in the time of trouble and despair. Or you're the same individual then as you were when you were on the mountaintop?
Well, one is the same, but what they should do, and that's what I've done, when I would fall, I would always try to fall on my face so I can think a little bit. And then I push myself up in a very vigorous manner and say, I'm going to do it again, but I'm not going to do it the same way. I'm not going to repeat these mistakes I made. And then you do better and better. And then you might fall again. When you fall down that second time, you do the same thing. And when you know anything, instead of falling, you're running and walking. Because when you make a lot of mistakes and fail and correct them, and don't continue to repeat those mistakes, you're considered a Michael Jordan. You're going to be a winner in anything you do, family, marriage, church, politics, economic development, whatever it is.
Anything you do.
Anything.
Well, Dr. Henderson, you know that in America, we reward individuals that try again. You know, it's not a crime to fail. It ought not be embarrassing. There should be no stigma associated with it. It should be looked upon as individuals that are trying to figure it out. And that's the kind of leadership, and that's the kind of charisma and the talent that we need to lead us through these trying times that we're in this country. You know, Jackson is experiencing a traumatic water loss event right here today. Mississippi has experienced floods in the last 2 years, especially Jackson. And so we see a lot of trouble, and we need leaders that have been the wagon master before, to someone that's been through there, someone that fell on their face and got up with more enthusiasm than they had before they fell. That's what we need in Jackson, Mississippi to fix this problem that we're having. I want you to share with our viewers out there what's going on with Jackson in this water crisis where every major news outlet in the world, and including from Europe and other places, are in Jackson.
Well, it's very clear, Mr. Socrates, that we have an administration that's new to solving problems. We have politicians. Some are qualified. Most of them are not. Most of them have not had any major leadership initiatives that they had to handle during their career. Most of them are not planners. Most of them are not people that have had the opportunity to own and manage successful businesses. Many of them just social workers type that go out and pray and wish that things will happen. But now the situation is so bad with the water crisis, until now experts are going to have to come in and get this resolved. And they are doing that. The local, state, and federal governments allegedly are working together to solve this problem. They're going to have certified specialists and the funds necessary to address the water crisis. But what I fear, sir, is once they get it addressed, have those pumps working throughout North, South, East, Hinds County, and then they leave and they have the same administrators in office and a lack of technical experts that they didn't have now up until the last 2 days or so. It's going to be the same thing. So you cannot expect any change in the water crisis other than a temporary, what I call shortstop, if you have the same politicians, the same mayor, the same council, and the same county supervisors that are not working together, not planning together, don't have a strategic plan of 10 or 15 or 20 years. And on top of that, they must have certified and qualified specialists to maintain those water pumps. And they're going to need about $1 billion to change the infrastructure, get the proper pipes that are currently in use with the technology they put in the pumping stations. And that's going to take contractors that's going to be making $10 and $30 million per contract. And the problem is, who are they going to give that money to?
Wow.
That's what I'm looking at.
Wow. So what you're saying is that there was a deficit in the talent in the Jackson community to operate the plants efficiently, even though we knew the plants were going to fail based upon the depreciation point that it had risen to and gotten to. And so we knew there was trouble on the horizon. But Dr. Henderson, what do you say to the fact that there was no money to fix the problems because Jackson experienced tremendous white flight and lost its rooftops? The number of businesses, the number of homes has been declined. There are only 54,000 households in Jackson, Mississippi, and yet the city was built to operate with 300,000 people, and we're down to 150,000 now. We've lost half our population, but yet we still have to maintain these wastewater plants and these drinking water plants. So what do you say to the fact that revenue shortfalls created this problem.
Well, that is one of the real facts. But now you just can't have a system for your community. You cannot have a system for your family. And you cannot have a system for others and let it fall apart. You have to take some kind of prioritized corrective action. If you have funds and not enough funds to solve that problem, you have to look at what you have and change some of your line items, your budgetary line items, and put the money in the most prioritized areas where you're going to help most of the people. And that's what they didn't do in this city. First of all, the equipment they had, they didn't have qualified, certified personnel to maintain it. My research shows you have to have someone that's a specialist at the water pumping station 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And you got to have someone in management that know what they're supposed to delegate. So if you have a manager that doesn't know what he or she is doing, and they are just going to do their 8 hours and go home. And then when you get them aboard to talk about the problems, they can't tell you what the problem is, nor do they know what they need to do to solve the problem. That has been the problem in Hinds County for the last several years. Now, they have had good people throughout the past. Many have retired. Some went to other places for a higher salary. And that's the other part. When you have problems, Mr. Socrates, and you need certified, qualified people, you have to recruit them and pay them. There are enough qualified, certified people in the Southwest that Jackson could have hired if they wanted to. You find out who the people are, find out what they're making, and give them a more attractive package and move them to Jackson or wherever, and they can make it happen in a manner that's going to reduce what I call chaos.
Well, other cities have experienced similar problems to Jackson. We go back to Flint, Michigan, and the water crisis there. There was a complete failure, colossal failure in that system, and the federal government had to step in, along with the state of Michigan, to help solve that problem. The federal government has stepped in now with the state of Mississippi to help solve Jackson's problem. This is going to bring a tremendous amount of expertise and resources to bear on solving this issue. Did the president do the right thing when he stepped in to support the state of Mississippi, because we are a deep red state, and certainly did not vote for Joe Biden?
Well, of course he did. If I were the president or any leader and I want to get in office again or get my comrades in office, I would go wherever I could go to help the people so I can get more votes. I want new votes. I want more votes. So you go into those dens of thieves and offer your support and be serious about it. Throw a few dollars there and help solve the problem. And all you're doing is helping yourself personally and your party. So that's a good move on the president, even though we have a lot of Republicans in this area.
Yeah, the Democratic Party will not win the state of Mississippi in a presidential election.
No, they won't. But now they will get a substantial number of votes. They won't get the state. But now when you add them all together, you can win in many cases. Now, they definitely won't get the electoral vote. But sometimes when you get those popular votes to a great degree, you can have enough maneuver and wiggle room to get yourself in a majority where you can win a presidential election.
You bring up an issue of the popular vote and electoral college votes and things of that nature. It seems to me there was a big debate about who actually elects the president of the United States of America.
Well, I'm going to tell you right quickly, we have done the research. Most people don't believe it, Mr. Socrates. Only 538 individuals in the 50 states elect the president. 538.
Say that again, Dr.
538 individuals elect the president of the United States. That's the Electoral College, and that consists of the members in the House and the Senate. Each state will send as many delegates, we call them electors, to the Washington to vote for the president. If you have six representatives and 2 senators, you have 8 electors. They are selected by the Republican or Democratic Party or whatever the major party is in that city, and it's usually the friends of the current senators and the governor. in those states, and the big money boys that finance the governor and the senators and the mayors in those big cities. And they give those guys and a few ladies marching orders to vote for the president. And that's what you do.
538 people.
That's right.
Elect the president of the United States. And Dr. Henderson, I've heard that bringing that down the ladder to the state governments, that only 3 people control the state of Mississippi.
That's right. And many other states. You have the governor, the lieutenant governor, and the speaker. They usually appoint all the state agency heads, and they tell them what they expect them to do in an interview. I've been in situations where I've applied for certain jobs throughout the last 50 or 60 years, and, as a director or above, worked for the federal government and state government and colleges and universities throughout the area, and they will always tell you what the major issues are. Now, if you get this job, we sure hope that you can support us with these goals and objectives. We have a plan. They usually will give you the plan if you ask for it, and they want to know what you can support. And if you're a high character person, you will look at the plan and say, sir, Mr. President, or Dean, or the purchasing agent, or whoever you're talking to, I most certainly can support this, and I have the following experience. That is, if you want the job. If you're into this, so therefore, I can't accept this, and I wouldn't be able to do these things, the first 3 on this plan. But now, I don't see anything wrong with the latter 6. I will not get that job.
So if we bring that on down, then if 3 people control the state of Mississippi, then when we get down to our municipality, who controls the municipalities and the county governments?
Well, you usually have a similar situation, but it's not that large. They have 3 on the state level. In the city level, you usually have the mayor and a board or council to make those decisions. The mayor, if it's a strong mayor, he is going to be over the administrative part of the operation for the city. He or she will then hire the ones to take over the various departments' heads. The city council, if they are strong enough, and in most cases they are not, unless they've been in office 30 or 40 years, can talk to the mayor and say, no, Mr. Mayor, you shouldn't select this person to be the head of the zoning department. I know someone with ample experience. They have worked in other areas, and now they're retired. They have moved back to Jackson or New York City or Chicago, and you ought to consider that person. And if they have good rapport, the mayor might say, yeah, I think I can do that. Otherwise, he's going to go in strong-headed, appoint his friends, half-relatives, business associates, sorority and fraternity friends in these responsible areas, and many times they don't have the proper experience. To give you an example, you might get one of your lawyer friends, been a failure out there as a lawyer in the private sector. So you hire that young male or female, make them a city attorney in New York City, Chicago, Jackson, Birmingham, anywhere, and give them that job. And time you have a major crisis and need some legal representation, you have to go and hire a firm that has the expertise, the national expertise, the international expertise to solve your problem. So you're going to pay them $2 or $3 or $10 million to do what your attorneys ought to be able to do. So now if you're a smart mayor, a smart council, and you have a group of supervisors that have the expertise and the smartness they need, they will get a person like that when they get in office and hire the best lawyers they can, the best accountant, the best tax specialist, but have someone on retainer that can be the consultant. That's what I recommend, and that's what I used to do when I had an opportunity to be a department head.
Well, good. I want you to stay with us. We're talking about government and structures and the crisis in Jackson and leadership in particular. We believe that leadership is the #1 ingredient that is required to move this city forward. We're going to talk about that more when we come back. We're getting ready to go to our station break. We want you to stay tuned. You're listening to Socrates Garrett Live, being broadcast right here from Jackson, Mississippi, in the heart of the deep, deep South. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Let's read and learn together. Meet Mason. Written by Sherry Tate, illustrated by David. Mason is a young, inspired learner. Walk with him as he uses his five senses to explore the world around him. Your young one can learn to identify shapes, numbers, letters, and more with Meet Mason. Available now on Amazon.com.
Hi, I'm Q Talicia Garrett. I am here to introduce our New South Development and Training Outreach Hour every Tuesday at 2 p.m., giving you information on how to become a part of the programs through USDA and Farm Service Agency. We can be reached at 678-779-9468. We can also be found online at newsouthoutreach.com.
Welcome. We're back. This is Socrates Garrett Live. We're broadcasting right here from Jackson, Mississippi, in an African-American-owned broadcast studio. You know, the goal is to have input on the narrative. Maybe we can't control the narrative, as so many others attempt to do, but we certainly got to have input on the narrative. There's so many things being said and so many rumors being spread. You know, it's vicious out here in the world of capitalism, where it's buyers beware and the survival of the fittest and the strong will always win. And we live in a society where we naturally are pitted against one another to survive and grow. And so we're taught that instinctively. And so if you're in an airplane crash and only two survivors there, and it's just you and your buddy, and you're in the 10th day without no food, you're then going to turn and start to look at your buddy. Because you're going to have to survive. God put in man, the number one drive that God put in man was the desire to survive against all odds, against any cause. The number two drive is to reappropriate, to increase your numbers. And so those are the two things that drive men most. Then you get into Maslow's hierarchy of needs on food, shelter, and water, and those things are down the list. But survival is the number one thing that we have to do. Now, the African-American community has been under siege and it has been misrepresented and underrepresented for the last 200 years. And so our conditions here have threatened our very survival. Now, my co-host has always said that the African-American community is losing ground fast, and he gives us only 8 years to turn this around, or we will be totally irrelevant. Dr. Henderson, tell us a little bit about the status of African Americans in this country.
Well, I hate to tell you, Mr. Socrates, because I've been talking about this for the last 10 years, and now we only have 8 years left for black people to redeem themselves in America as a person of influence. During the last few years, the black people have fallen in the economic, political, and social pecking order to number 7. They used to be number 2. When the white folks wanted something to happen in America, they would call some of the so-called black leaders that they appointed themselves over the leaders like the president of the Urban League, executive director of the NAACP, and many other groups, some of the big leaders in the sororities and fraternities, a few of the big leaders that have black businesses. And Some will say, well, Doc, you're talking about people that are independent. No, those people are not really independent because they have gotten many of their resources to help them with their businesses from white banks, white funding agencies, and so forth. And anytime you get money as an organization or a business from someone, if it's over a certain amount of money, you can't spend that money the way you want to spend it. You cannot address certain issues publicly if it's in counter to what they stand for. I mean, the people that gave you the money. So therefore, when they have a problem, they call on you. Now they don't have to call on black folks anymore. They have to call on the Arabs, the Hispanics, the LGBT community, the what I call the Asians. They are popping up now in influential positions. You see more and more of them now starting businesses. You see more and more of those same groups that I just mentioned on radio and television with shows. They are making movies now. They're getting positions as producers and writers on comedy teams that they didn't work on before in just the last few years. So every time a so-called other minority, other than black, get a job, they are usually getting that job that the black had 5, 10, or 15 years ago. So we are gradually going down the line. Therefore, they are really saying now that we know black folks, you are an outcast. You are a member of a permanent underclass. Your numbers now and your influence is going to be descended to the bottom. And that's why we are number 7 in the pecking order, not only in the South, not only in America, but worldwide. No one in the world, in government, in major business, have any respect for the black man. In Africa, where they have 99% of the population, but 99% of the Europeans manage 99% of the production, distribution, and exchange in Africa. And that's the richest nation in the world. I believe there are about 54 different nations, I believe, in Africa. They all have their own presidents. They call them other things. But they're supposed to be the leaders and the planners for Africa. And those guys have been propped up by the French, the British, the Spanish, and the Arab Republic leaders, and the Chinese. And they are controlling Africa and gradually getting more and more land, more and more political power by giving the current leaders money to help them address their failing structures. So therefore, in a few years, the Africans are going to lose most of the little power they think they have now. Anytime they go against the Europeans or the Chinese or the Russians, they're going to have a coup, and they'll be out of office within 30 days or less. They're going to kill them. I'm just going to use the word that they're going to use. They said we're going to get rid of those people.
Now, Doc.
Yes, sir.
That's pretty strong language.
Of course it's strong.
It's pretty strong language. Now, there's got to be some way that African-American business people and African-American leaders can pursue a quality of life that requires them to do business with the establishment without losing their identity or becoming enslaved and trapped to the establishment. There's got to be a way for that to happen, because if there is not a way for that to happen, it relegates one to say, well, I don't think I should even try and participate in this democracy, in this capitalism system that we have here. I ought to just kind of stay home and drink some wine and lay under the shade tree and chill out, because there is absolutely no win. Because if I'm successful, I'm enslaved. And if I don't do anything, I'm enslaved. And so I don't know exactly what model is the appropriate one for us to recommend to African American leaders. You must maintain your independence at all costs. But that doesn't mean you got to get out of this game, because the African American community needs its smartest and brightest leaders, the ones that do understand the two-column accounting system, the ones that do understand how you manage money, the ones that have got educated at Harvard and Yale and gone on to medical school and got law degrees. We have to have those people in our community, and yet they don't seem to stand up much in community needs because of what you're saying. They're afraid that they're going to lose the little ground that they have gotten coming up through the establishment. This is one hell of a dichotomy that we have here, that we're going to have to free our people some kind of way so that they do know that it's possible to be successful in America and not become trapped and enslaved and retain their independence and their ability to do what's right for their people. Now, Marcus Garvey said it very best. He said that I'm going to be loyal first to my God. Now, he didn't say your God. You can be whatever your God is. He said, I'm going to be loyal first to my God. I'm going to be loyal second to my family. I'm going to be loyal third to my race. I'm going to be loyal fourth to my country. God, family, race, country. He didn't lose his independence anywhere in there, in his pecking order of coming down through there, because God's not going to entrap you in slavery. Hopefully your family won't, and it used to be your race wouldn't. We may be slipping on that a bit now, but your country is always bear watching. From the writing of the Constitution, from the very beginning, your country has to be watched carefully. Explain.
It's very simple. A lot of black people have been told, and I have told them, and then I'm going to give you a solution, that if you don't do certain things, you are doomed. You're already considered an outcast. You're already considered a member of the permanent underclass. But that is temporary. If you want to solve the problems, you have to do the following. You have to say there are certain areas of activity that I'm going to control from birth to death, where I am, with the resources I have, and with my own leaders. And those areas are education and training, leadership, economic development, politics, and religion. So all you do, you look at what you have, where you are, where you're the majority, and you start training your own people. You start pooling your resources economically. You start building your community, one house or one business at a time. But you have to have a plan to do this that's been sanctioned by the church, the community organizations, and the business leaders. So there are certain businesses you're going to have to take over in order to change. Remember, you're where you are, you're in the majority, you already have the resources, but you have to have a plan, a prioritized corrective action plan. And I give the example that if you, in the church community, you, as the preacher or the deacon board, can go to your church building and look to the north, south, east, and west and say, here we are in this community. We're not going to leave and go to the suburbs. We're going to identify 2 houses, 2 businesses to the north, south, east, and west. That's 8 small business institutions. We're going to rehab them, tear them down, or build them over. And we're going to put our businesses here. We're going to control certain things. We're going to have convenience stores, grocery stores, going to have salons. We're going to have a small credit union. We're going to have schools that's going to be supported by our church and private community leaders, because we're not going to depend on the public school system to train our children. And we're going to do a contract with the public schools in order to put our children in areas that we don't want to get into right now. We're going to get a contract where they can go and get in the science lab, play football or basketball. But we're going to offer tennis, soccer, and things like that in our own training institution, because the law has been passed now where you can get state money for public, private schools, parochial schools, or anything. Now, they're going to change that law if black people start doing that. And I've been telling people for some years, you don't have to go and boycott the people in your community that have grocery stores, convenience stores, banks, or whatever. Just don't service them. Create your own. And those people are going to disappear eventually.
So, Doc, let's
It's
take
just that simple.
let's take that theory and deal with it for a moment. African American leaders have to be independent. Let's take the mayor of the city of Jackson, Mayor Chokwe Antar Lumumba. He appears to be a very independent person. The more independent that you are, it seems as if it draws attacks from friends and folks. You then become attacked by the establishment because they don't have the control that they want on you. And then you get attacked by the friends because you're not a part of their clique. And so you find yourself in a situation where it must be the loneliest position in the world. And so we go right down our leadership role and we see whether this independence is working or in fact have these individuals been compromised. A compromise is different than corrupt. Black people and your adversaries will always jump to the word corrupt. You corrupt, you're stealing, you're cheating. They will always go there. They go there so that they can elicit their friends or their enemies to take you out, like the FBI, the CIA, the auditor's office, etc. So they use the term corrupt. But compromise doesn't seem to get much light shine on it. Would you say that the mayor of Jackson is independent or is he compromised?
Well, at this point, I don't think he's independent, and he is not as compromised as he's going to be. Now, the mayor of Jackson, Mississippi, is very sharp. He's highly educated, but he doesn't have any municipal experience other than a few months or a few years. His job has always been in the legal profession. Nothing wrong with that. He doesn't have good rapport with the state leaders. He doesn't have good rapport, according to the information I read, with the federal leaders. The state leaders are Republicans. The federal leaders, up until a few months ago, were Republicans. And from what I've been reading, the mayor does not have good relationships with those folks.
Well, let me ask you a question about that.
Yes.
Because to have good relationships with those folks requires compromise. When you are identified as the man or woman of the year by the establishment, it appears that you have been compromised. So you can't have it both ways. You can't say that I'm an independent leader capable of doing what's best for my people, for my God, my race, my family, my country. You can't have those principles if, in fact, you're up there begging hand and foot from your adversaries who are going to tell you the conditions upon which they're going to help you.
Well, the problem is, Mr. Socrates, is that you can get around those things. There are mayors that can get along with the opposite party. Now, we have a great mayor in Mississippi, a stone's throw from Jackson, called Mayor Flaggs in Vicksburg. He is a black mayor, very progressive. He could go to the state capitol. He can go to Washington and get most of the things he wants because he is not hollering and squalling saying, I'm a Democrat. He's not saying I'm a Republican. He is saying he is an independent and that he is what I call neutral. My job is to take care of this city. I'm going to do what it takes to keep our finances together. We're going to have a good infrastructure, and I'm going to get with the people with the money, whether I like them or not, and I'm going to put something in writing called a proposal so they can see what I want and what I need, and I'm going to ask them to support me. And that's exactly what he does. And that's what the superintendent ought to be doing in Jackson, Mississippi, and other areas where the schools are falling. Right in Clinton, Mississippi, in Hinds County, they have an excellent public school system, high rating. They have several on the coast, some up in South Haven, North Mississippi. And all the superintendents in the failing school district ought to just go and call their superintendents that are winning, that have A schools and A+ schools and so forth, that have lack of money, but they know how to stretch it and move it around to make themselves successful, and follow their model. So any black mayor that's not doing anything or don't like the other in the other parties need to go and talk to Mayor Flagg, George Flagg in Vicksburg, and use his model. Go and talk to the Clinton superintendent. Talk to the superintendent of South Haven and some of the schools on the coast. That's what the JPS superintendent and board need to do. If they don't want people to know they are not up to date on the latest strategy, they can have private meetings and meet with those folks. And if they don't know how to put their plans together, how to pull up their enrollment, how to recruit the best students or whatever, they look at what they are doing. There's nothing wrong with duplicating success.
Well, let me ask you a question about that.
Yes, sir.
When we had Kanye West and Jim Brown in the White House with President Trump, they were trying to get resources for their people, for their projects or whatever, but they were looked upon by the African American community as traitors.
That's right.
As individuals that had sold out, and that's a term that we hear all the time, that when you label your enemy as a sellout, then that means that you want to take him on and beat him politically and get him out of office. So George Flagg, who is a good friend of mine and a great mayor over in Vicksburg, I don't know if he possesses the charisma enough to become mayor of a city the size of Jackson with the mindset of the African American population. And so it is a tightrope that you're asking a mayor to walk in order to try and move his city forward. And maybe you ought to be teaching that class. Maybe you ought to have a curriculum out there on how mayors go to D.C., go to the Republican-dominated legislatures and beg them for money, be seen with them on the podium, eating dinner with them, and maintain favor with the African-American community that is pro-Democrat and staunch anti-Republican. Maybe you ought to teach how do you do that.
Well, we have a curriculum already set for that. I've been teaching this for some years now, but it has not been in the political arena. It's been in the education arena. See, the politics, education, and the church officials have the same problems. They need funding. They need resources. They need experts in various areas. And all of them are either in politics, in business, or on the state or federal level in the various areas that I mentioned. So you don't have to love your enemy. You got to teach your enemy that I'm going to respect you and I demand respect. We are all citizens. We are all using the same money because we are public officials. We elected our opponent, and I want what's due to me. And this is my proposal, and I expect you to work with me, and I'm going to work with you. We're going to respect each other and give me $400 million for this project that I want.
You heard it from our good friend, the renowned orator and the educator that's sought after all over this world. He says that it can be done. He says that you can maintain your loyalty to the black community and you can dine with the Republican establishment who has had a stronghold over African American progress throughout this entire country. The many terrible deeds that were done in the African American community has to be set aside, and you now have to be able to walk into the office and come out with the resources necessary to move your small black towns forward. Many times, I think that our African American leadership gets a real bad deal. You know, being mayor in a poor city is a tough job. They tell me one of the worst jobs in the world is to preach the funeral of a worthless person. And being a mayor is a tough job in a small, broke city. I look at mayors, and there are 66 mayors. Last time I checked, in the state of Mississippi, there are 66 African American mayors in this state. And everywhere you find them, you find that their communities are in disrepair, that we're losing ground. Everywhere you see that in the urban cities all across this country. And so it cannot be the failure of African American leadership. There has to be something systemic that's happening here. There has to be that if you dry up the resources, I don't care who you are, you're going to fail. It's like a pro football team. If I don't give you any players, you are not going to win. So you take your bad news bears and you do the best you can with them, and you try to move to a position of triumph. Booker T. Washington said it best. He said that it is not the heights that you obtain, but the depths from which you came. And African Americans start from a real deep hole. And it's hard to pull themselves up. And when you find yourself being taken on friendly fire from those that look like you and those that live in your community, and taking on artillery from those that have been traditional adversaries, it's got to be a lonely spot. It's got to be the most difficult place to be. And so I want to encourage African American mayors all across this country, African American council people, African American school superintendents, that you got tough jobs. And I know you got tough skin, but friendly fire is something that is absolutely crushing. In America, we tend to pile on. We see that you're down, if you're being hit from all sides, then we pile on. Very few come to your aid and stand by your side in times of disrepair. In hard times, you find yourself all alone. You got to do the best that you can. You got to be absolutely certain that you remain independent, that you don't sell out, that you understand that your reason that you're there is to improve the quality of life in the African American community, to eradicate poverty in the African American community. That has got to be your focus. And so Dr. Henderson says that he has a curriculum and he can teach our leaders how to walk this tightrope and how to bring the bacon home for your citizens and retain your independence so that black boys and girls would want to be like you in the days ahead. Dr. Henderson, we're coming to the end of our program. As always, this is a tough act. People need your leadership. You need to be teaching African American leaders, politicians especially, because we see that their credentials are not up to par for the task ahead. I'm going to give you the final words on what our folk need to do and how you could help them.
Well, the first thing our folks need to do is register and vote. Registering and not voting is like committing suicide. Next thing people have to do, black folks specifically, got to stop falling in love and say, I'm going to die with the Democrats or the Republicans or the Libertarians. They're going to have to stop putting the party as their major focus and put issues as their major focus, economic issues, political issues, and getting with the people that are running for various offices, since they don't have enough majority to win an outright position in certain areas. And you give your support and resources to those people that's going to give you 2 of those 5 things you want as a black community. And then you train your people so in a few years they can be in those positions. You can't get everything you want initially, but if you propose and have a corrective action plan that's prioritized, you can work with anyone that will give you part of what you want, and you build your base. Pool your resources, pool your funds, build where you are with what you have with your own leaders, and continue to train them, sir. And I guarantee you, you'll be like Hannibal. Sometimes you have to go across the mountain. You don't go around the road that's already set by the enemy and surprise them. And then you start whipping them, and they will give you respect. That's what Hannibal did when the Romans thought that those black folks in Carthage and other areas, they are infidels. We're going to take their land. We're going to rape their women. We're going to kill them like cats and dogs. And Hannibal, a black general, says, we can't take this any longer. We're going to invade them. And this black leader was told by his command staff, man, that's the craziest idea anybody can come up with. You can't go through the Alps, a mountain range. And he went across the Alps during the wintertime. Half of his soldiers and all his elephants died except a few. And he surprised those Romans. And you find a lot of black folks today in Rome.
Wow.
But they are passing as mulattoes, you see. Now that is the way black people have to do it. You got to surprise your enemy. Do something that they don't expect you to do. Sometimes you have to act like you love your enemies. That's all I'm going to say at this time.
Wow. You heard it. You heard it from Dr. Henderson. Hannibal, great African-American general. In closing, I would just say it. I was told that Hannibal, when he approached the mighty Alps, that he sat atop his horse and he said to all of his soldiers, he said, behold the mighty Alps. Behold the mighty Alps. Behold the mighty Alps. Then he said, I see no Alps. Forward march. And the rest is history.
That's what blacks got to do, sir.
Forward.
Some gonna die, some gonna suffer. But in the end, the Lord will bless them. But if you don't do nothing but pray, Mr. Socrates, and don't do any work, the Lord will forget you. That's why blacks were in slavery for 400 and some years, and still in slavery. We've been praying too much and not working enough. We're not planning enough. We're not taking the chances we need to go beyond the status quo. We got to come up with a new, prioritized corrective action plan with a mission, with goals, with a timeline, with an evaluation team, with project managers that's qualified to know when things are not right. Just that simple, sir.
You heard it here on We Believe Digital. To all you mothers out there, don't forget to name your child Hannibal. Name your boy baby as Hannibal. You know, think about it, what you're saying to him as a child. This has been We Believe Digital. Sometimes we ramble a little bit, but most of the time we're right on point. We've been live with Dr. Henderson. And until we come again next Friday, we want everyone to have a great weekend. Enjoy your holidays. Stay safe out there. And let's go to work, black people. Time is running out. Good night.
Suppose you had just one Hannibal
Socrates Garrett ENT.com is a diversified firm specializing in recycled aggregates and crushed concrete. Socrates Garrett ENT.com's recycled materials provide the construction industry with significant economic and environmental benefits by recycling clean concrete rubble into M.Dot grade rock materials. Recycled aggregates and crushed concrete can be applied to driveways, road construction, bank protection, parking lots, general bulk fills, and more. For more information, please call 601-896-0084 or visit us online at SocratesGarrettENT.com.